Hey folks, Jonathan here. Finally got the birthday present from my wife. Got her a little side-by-side. I was having trouble finding one. A lot of these things, you know, people's put snorkel kits and stuff like that on them and took them underwater and just made a mess of them. And I wanted, you know, one in really good shape, but didn't want to pay a lot, of course, like everybody else. But you know, didn't have to be new. This is 2016. Had 110 hours on it, so that's not too bad. And this was owned by a gentleman that, you know, when you talk to somebody on the phone, because I'm not one for texting, but when you talk to somebody about something, you can pretty much judge them pretty quick on the phone as to, you know, whether they're full of BS or not. So this guy here, you know, took really good care of this thing. Actually, it's dirty, really dirty right now because my wife and grandson was riding around yesterday, but and we live in a dusty place with all this sand. So, but anyway, hard time getting one. Every one of them that I was trying to get either got sold quick or, you know, wasn't what they were supposed to be. I had one lined up that the guy, you know, we was going to meet, and then before it was over with, he told me that it was supposed to all be good mechanically. There's a few little, you know, visual issues that didn't bother me. But when I got ready to go, then he informed me that there was an exhaust leak and the shifter didn't, it needed some adjustment and some work, and I just explained to him that I was looking for something I didn't have to work on. So like I said, this is 105 or 110 hours of what's on it. So you know, it's in really good shape. The only thing the guy had done, and he was an elderly gentleman, he put a stereo, and it's got a remote control and everything inside the glove compartment, and that was it. So really good shape, good price. So finally got that over with, and that was a pretty daunting task. You know, that's trying to do something in a hurry and do it on, you know, a budget too. It's pretty rough. Anyway, let's get to work. Okay, back on this truck. Don't look much different than it did, but it is a lot different. Boy, I had to do a lot to it. Had to do a lot of changing. They sent me the wrong gaskets for the oil cooler, so I had to pull it back off. I went ahead and made gaskets, put it back on. One of them was leaking. Wasn't cut out right. It actually, you know, had an opening and it actually allowed it to leak. So we got that straightened out. Changed the entire exhaust on it. Of course, changed the engine and transmission. Got the new fuel pump on. Ended up having to change this cover. There was a crack on this side of this cover, and this is actually the cover in the mount for the injector pump. And this covers your upper timing gear. And what had happened was it cracked, and then everything was on here, and evidently the oil that I was seeing that I thought was coming off the fuel pump or around the fuel pump was actually coming off of that cover and leaking down. So that was actually the major leak. That was probably what was blowing back on the firewall. So that's taken care of. I know a lot of people said something about that fan. That fan was the one that was on this engine. I had no plans to use that fan. I think the fan shroud was missing off of it, so I'm assuming that it probably ate the shroud. So, you know, the fan that I originally had goes back on this. Using all the best parts, and PTO's on the transmission, PTO shafts in. Like I said, all the exhaust has been replaced. Muffler. Got pretty much everything done. I had to do some work on the power steering bracket to get that. They wasn't strong from the factory. They had some issues. I've seen some update brackets and stuff that U-Haul had put on them, but I had to do some work on this one to get it right. We're trying to do this thing where we don't have to mess with it again for a while. So everything is getting changed. I've already changed the steering gear box. The other one was leaking. We could have put a C on it, but it's just easier if I already had one to just swap it on there. So now all I've got to do is set the front radiator section on. It all goes in one piece, and hook everything up, and then we're going to drive this thing over to Charlie's, and we're going to set the front end on it. I guess I can drive it down there with nothing on the front one trip. And I had a bolt broke off in here. We got that out so we can go ahead and get the bumper back on. I pulled the bumper off because it's easier to get the steering gear box, because you gotta, you know, hit that with a hammer to get that to come loose, so you can get a better swing on it. So bumper goes back on, the radiator and all that's getting ready to go back on, and we will go ahead and get over to Charlie's here in just a little bit, and we're going to be done with this, and I can get on everything else. I got the rings, I got the 2 pistons, I've got the gasket kit for the Studebaker, but I think we're going to go ahead and probably maybe do the gas tank. I don't know, Noah will be here in a little bit and we'll figure it out as we go. But Noah and I worked late last night on this thing. Now I've had a lot of towing going on. It kind of went crazy, so that's one of the reasons I'm running behind on this. And I actually gave myself a week, and it's taken every bit of it. So, but that's all right. We'll have it done and it'll be right. That's the important part. All right, I figure we'll start it up. We've got alternator, air conditioning compressor, power steering pump, and air compressor. And I know I'm gonna get comments on this. Alternator belt. Don't matter how tight you tighten these, that bottom flops. And I've learned that over the years after running these trucks for a long time. They're going to flop, and that's all there is to it. A lot of times you'll see the bottom of the air compressor flop too. But anyway, let's see if she'll fire up. Alright, you can hear my airbags on the back coming up already. Don't take long to build air on this thing. So, alright, shock mounts are done. Replaced one of the brake hoses on the coming down from the master cylinder. So we're getting all this little stuff tied up, so that's why it's taking so long. Okay, I don't know if everybody had heard the story on this parts truck. I don't even know if I told it, but here's the deal. Me and my wife had went to eat at a restaurant there in Sanford, which we don't do very often, but we was on the way back. I got behind this truck and didn't have a bed on it. I think he was hauling hay bales, but he had a hitch on the back, and he was driving down the road, and I thought I knew whose it was. Wasn't positive, but I was pretty sure I knew who the driver was. And I told my wife I needed that truck, I was gonna buy it, and she pretty much laughed at me. But anyway, about a week after that, I got a call for somebody stuck in a field on a farm, and when I got out there, it was this truck. And of course, normally you would, charge a recovery and pull them out, but I just asked him, I said, look, you interested in selling the truck? And he said, yeah. I said, how much? He said, $1,500. It was sitting out there running. And I said, well, I'll tell you what, I won't even charge you for pulling it out. She paid him, brought the truck home. Done and over. And so far, we've used the engine, transmission, wiper motor, heater blower motor, and wiring. Let me see, I put the rear tires over on the top kick. So needed the tires and rims. Didn't have to mount them, just swapped them over. And a lot of hoses, little stuff. I've still got radiator left. We used the exhaust off this one. I still want to use the air ride on another truck. These windshields, believe it or not, we learned over the years that they're 1/2 inch shorter than a regular International windshield. I guess because it's U-Haul. And I ran into that issue the first time when Safe Light come out to put a windshield in my truck, and then it wouldn't fit, so they had to take one out of another one of my trucks and put in it, because I had to have the truck running, and then they had it cut, a 1/2 inch cut off of it. So after getting a hold of an old school glass guy that used to do the U-Haul windshields, he laughed and said, yeah, that's one of the issues, is they're 1/2 inch shorter. So we've got a good windshield here, we've got good door glasses and all that stuff. There's a master cylinder, there's a hydro boost with the electric, and that's a safety, in case you do lose your engine, you still got brakes. A lot of good parts left on this thing. I know a lot of people said, why don't you fix this instead of swap the parts out, but I needed these parts for other trucks also. But another thing too is this truck wasn't in that good a shape. There's a lot of rust down there on the floors, and I'm not into rust, I can promise you that. So well, I am into rust collar. How about that? Don't mind it on an old car, don't want it on a work truck. But you know, here we got perfectly good rotors, nice and thick if I ever need one. But anyway, $1,500 for this truck, and I've used all these parts. That was a no-brainer. I couldn't have bought a good engine, you know, for 1,500 bucks, or that, you know, they would have went around that. So, you know, I got a good engine, good 5-speed, just on and on the parts that you know I got from this thing. So, you know, one of the things that makes you successful in business is not throwing money away. And if I would have bought every individual part for this truck that I needed, daggum, I could have went and bought another truck. And that's the whole point of this, is, you know, you don't want to go so cheap that you run around with dangerous stuff. You just want to go so cheap that you can afford to stay in business and afford to, you know, do competitive prices or cheap prices. And my prices are usually too cheap, but you know, I don't do it to get rich. I do it to make a living. So there's a big difference. So keep the overhead down, and you can stay in business good. But this is the way to do this. This is, you know, there's no reason to go out there and start buying a bunch of parts. Find you an old truck, you know, buy it. You know, honestly, it bothers me. This had a good title. It bothers me to tear this truck apart, because, you know, this could have been a good truck. I could have built this truck, welded some floors in it, and put a bed on it, done something with it. But, you know, you can't keep all of them. And, you know, this worked out just excellent for what it was for. You know, steering gear box, that's an expensive piece. I've still got my old one that's got a leak, but I can still keep it and use it. Put a seal in if I need to. So this is the way to do it. Don't go out throwing money. You know, it's had some issues. We took care of all the issues. And on the engine, it's in there, it's running good. I think, you know, I drove this truck, so I know it ran good. I know it drove good. It just had some oil leak issues. And I think we've got them all taken care of, and I think we're going to have a good truck. So. All right, I just need to get that radiator back on now. Okay, folks, we've got her together. Everything's finished up except for the letters. And I might buff the cab out a little bit. It's a little shinier than the rest, or the front end is anyway. But I've been so busy, been really busy towing and stuff. Also, this heat has just kicked my butt. Been picking up a lot. We got a Cavalier hitting the back over there. We got a burnt Honda, Nissan hit, and let me see, we've got another one right here. Front end damage. So that one did hit hard. I think this was this one run the stop signs. What happened? You usually see, because the front end is actually pushed over. That means this vehicle that hit it was traveling in this direction. Okay, we're going to start her up here. I do have to, the return lines on top of the injectors, there's little plastic pieces with the lines that connect together and O-rings. I am going to replace them, but I had to order the set. Let's see how well she starts up here. Really well. Alright, let me take her for a drive. Charlie did give me one run. He always says you don't charge extra for runs. But I can't complain, because he didn't charge nothing. So I'm not complaining at all. He guaranteed me one thing, and that's all that mattered, is it wouldn't be yellow anymore. Okay, it's pretty late. It's not quite, you know, the sun's getting ready to go down. I think I'm going to let it cool off a while. And I'll probably take the Studebaker out for a ride. And then I don't think I'm going to do the tank yet on that. I think we're going to get started on the Studebaker Golden Hawk. And I'm going to do things a little different on the heads. I'll show you as I go. How about that? But so the next video should be on it. We'll start putting the engine back together. We'll work tomorrow. We'll see how the towing goes, but it probably won't be that busy, because there won't be any garages open tomorrow, Memorial Day. And so I'll start getting the pistons ready, start putting them back in. Kind of hard to do by yourself, but if you use 2 pieces of fuel line on the ends of your rod bolts, and you can get them down in there to line up with the crankshaft, okay. So it's a little bit more aggravating getting up and down, but you know, used to do it all the time. So we'll do it again, not a big issue. But yeah, I'm gonna rest a while until it cools off, and then we're probably just gonna take the old Studebaker for a ride and a bear in its natural habitat. And then, like I said, we're gonna go ahead and get to work on this thing, and we'll get the shop vac out here. I didn't want to blow all that stuff off because I didn't want to blow anything in the engine. I think shop vac's the best situation for this. Really couldn't do it before we took the engine apart because the intake, that's all under the intake, and you wouldn't be able to get down in there to blow it off or even pressure wash it off good. So we will see what we can do. The new rings, check the end gap, perfect. So we're good to go. Another thing I want to say, a lot of people, for some reason, and I'll touch more on this when we do the video on it, but you know, let's just yank it out, bore it, rebuild it. Even had somebody tell me that my heads looked like they were warped a little bit. If you can tell that they're warped a little bit on camera, then you know you're good, because you know, without actually checking them with a straight edge, I can't tell whether they're warped or not. So what it comes down to is having the means, and you know, the skills are not that important, because there's plenty of internet information and books and everything else on this. But if you do your checking, if you check your bore, you know, check your bore about 3 spots up and down, your ring end gaps, you know, you can mic it. I got an inside mic, that's what I actually checked them with. Check your head for level. Do stuff like that instead of just buying parts, throwing parts at something, because you know there's tolerances that's allowable, and if it's within them tolerances, I don't quite understand why someone's so worried about ripping things apart and, you know, starting over. And you know, still every time I do a video on this, I get a flack about the fact that I left the engine in it. This was common practice, absolute common practice in the 40s and 50s, and possibly up into the 60s when you done an engine. It wasn't, you know, it's not that hard. And especially, you know, they was probably working under, you know, under a pit, or had a pit in the shop, and people didn't have the lifts back then. And I mean, it was just common practice to leave an engine in and work on it and do it. I've got a friend that actually has a machine that hooks to the flywheel and turns your flywheel, and you can actually grind one rod journal and just replace one rod, or one rod bearing, oversize it, and oversized bearing, undersize the crankshaft, and hopefully, if everything goes well, I'll be able to do a video on that and show you. Hey, George, the elderly fellow that I've been friends with for years and years, he actually sold me my first rollback. He's still got a lot of old stuff, a lot of old machines. He's got 2 boring bars. I think we're going to go ahead and get another boring bar. I used to do quite a bit of boring and be quite boring also, but I used to do a lot of boring on tractor engines and stuff. So I'll probably go ahead and get one. And then I got my, let me see, I've got the rotor lathe and everything I've got from him, drum lathe. It's an old Bear, and I picked up, you know, a few other machines from him. The big lathe I've got, the 20-foot long lathe, and he's got quite a bit more stuff over there, and he's, you know, pretty much not able to do anything and retired. So he's got some new old stock parts. He had his own auto parts, and he's got new old stock parts from Model A era back, and I'm supposed to possibly go give him a offer, or he's going to give me a price on all of what he's got. And he's also, like I said, the boring bar, and he's got a military trailer that has it was some of you may have seen it before if you're in the military or are familiar with one, but this is a mobile machine shop. It's actually got a lathe, you name it, it's got it in it, and had sides that folded down, and had a 4-foot walkway around it, and it's got a 100-ton pen press for tracks for a dozer, a gap bed lathe, and all kinds of, there's a born bar in it. There's all kinds of other machines, and I've talked to him about the trailer for a few years, and I may end up with it before it's over with. I'd love to buy it. Anyway, so back on this tomorrow. We'll start getting things cleaned up. We, supposed to have already done it, but like I said, jumped on that wrecker, rollback, and got it knocked out. And a few little things I got to do to it, I can knock out through the week, and maybe we can have this thing running in the next couple of days. All right, appreciate everybody watching, and until next time, bye.